All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm here with Humaira Ahmed of Locelle. Humaira, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kemp. I'm Humaira Ahmed, founder and CEO of Locelle, which is a talent development platform dedicated to advancing women in the workplace. We do this through our one-to-one mentor matching technology.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's get started today. So my first question is, how would you describe what you do in your job on an average work week to a 5-year-old?
Wow. I would say that I I lead a team. I am doing great work. We're challenging status quo, which they may not understand, but making some changes, social impact work. We make workplaces better. And That's what I would say in that, leading a team, really being a good role model for not just our team, clients, partners, but also making the world a better place. If I could easily put it for a 5-year-old, I think my daughters would understand that.
Awesome. Perfect. How do you define culture at the highest level? So outside of a company or a corporation or organization, just the highest level. And would that definition change? Would that definition change if you're talking about an organization?
Yeah, that is such a big question, Kemp, because we live our core values here at Locale and at home. High level, I learned this a long time ago. It's just the way people live their lives, essentially. And so, when you think about that, it does change because it depends on the work that you do, where you live, who your friends are, who your mentors, advisors are, who do you look up to, what space are you in, and then looking at your core values. As for me, as a leader, it's always, just as an example, in our house, we have this rule: we're not going to care about who is right. We're going to focus on what is right. That rule stands for our company. So I think when we talk about culture, doing the right thing can be really, really hard, especially when it's not the norm. But having that as a core value of how I would live my life, how I would want how are you going to make workplaces better, as an example? Well, let's start with doing the right thing.
Awesome.
And so, and I think just it does change and evolve. And I will tell you that over the last few years of, running this tech company, I've learned so much, and I know how much more I have to learn still. But it's really bringing your day-to-day core values of being a good person, doing the right thing is what we bring to workplaces.
Fantastic. I love that. You make me think of one thing I tell my son all the time. He's 8, and kids that age are always concerned with whose fault something is. And I always tell him, it really doesn't matter whose fault it is. Let's solve this. Let's solve this. Let's resolve this. Let's figure out how to fix all this. And it's a shift for me too, realizing that it really doesn't matter, whose fault it is, unless there was intention or you need to, teach a lesson.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
When you think of poor organizational culture, what are the first things that come to mind for you?
Oh, wow. I would say just lack of transparency. When I say that, it doesn't have to be, this is how much a CEO makes in terms of salary. This is how much this person makes. That can also be, a bit challenging. But transparency in how we do things, what our business goals are, how each position contributes to that goal. And being able to, because we all know what the other person, whoever it is that we're dealing with, whether that's our peer, whether that's, leader, we have a bit of intuition is a powerful thing, and we know what might be happening, or we may have assumptions about what might be happening, but the leaders can even build up the courage to share that, where we're headed, what's coming up. I think just alignment of the transparency is really key, and that's something that I really see time and time again where there's challenges, because you hear people don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers, and I think and especially I don't have a lot of experience working at big corporations. For me, it's been about startups, medium-sized tech companies. And this is the one thing that I see, like even as a small thing is, oh, we'll offer you equity. Great. A lot of people don't even know what that means. They don't even know what that could be even potentially worth 5 years from now, 3 years from now. It just sounds, nice and fancy, like, oh, I'll get some stock options. Do you know how much they're worth today? So I think just even being able to share the details of that, especially when you're looking to attract the best talent, so people can make, well-informed decisions. And transparency is something that I am learning. I mean, there's obviously there's a time and place for things, but being able to share what others, what even as leaders you anticipate others, kind of might be wondering about. I think being upfront can do us a lot of good.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. In one of my other interviews, one of the leaders spoke about at a time he's a very transparent leader, and he said, kind of says open source leadership is his style. And he actually shared that at one point when he was leading his company, I think it was 20 to 30 people at the time, that he didn't know what they were going to do next, but they were going to figure it out and get there. And he kind of realized that as the leader, as the captain of the ship, sometimes you don't want to tell people that you don't know because it makes them feel uneasy. And it was interesting. It harkened back to a movie where there's a ship captain, and he tells his first mates that that he tells his whole ship that I don't know exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna solve it and we're gonna get there. And his chief of staff pulls him in the back and says, "You never say that." And in a military situation, that a lack of confidence from leadership creates a lack of confidence among the staff. So transparency incredibly important. It's interesting to see, because I'm like you. I would like for all of us to be able to operate in a completely transparent way, but I do understand that sometimes there are things that sometimes things that we need to keep, and that puts a lot of pressure on leaders to hold on to those things and sometimes deal with those things in a vacuum. How do you deal with those most challenging things that come up that sometimes you can't share with your team?
Yeah, I mean, when you were sharing that story about this other person, I realized like last year, it was COVID last year, it's still here, but earlier, just before COVID hit, we were running out of money. And I remember just even, talking to some advisors and and by the way, we bootstrapped our company. And now we're break even, which is amazing. But last year, I remember just even thinking, how do I share that? I mean, we have salaries to pay. I don't want to, create this. I'll figure it out. I know that I'll figure it out. We'll get the money. But do I share this with people? And I remember everybody sharing, do not, because they're going to get freaked out like anybody would. They're going to start to apply to other jobs. And even if you're able to get the money, they're gonna be gone. And so that's, I just think of, there's been a lot of obviously challenging times, but that one really stands out as, do you share that? And I remember around the same time, whenever he asked for a raise, and I remember just thinking, oh my God. So I was candid in that, look, I'm doing all my best to make sure that we stay afloat at this time and grow. So unfortunately, I can't, promise that raise, but know that I'm working on it. So, but it wasn't that, sorry, you can't get a raise, period. It wasn't that, anyway, it was just, I think just even being able to be transparent in a way where you're not lying, you're not giving false perception of where you're at. But at least I think for startups, it's hard because you also want to be able to share with your team, like, look, trust me, right? It's really built around trust. But also I will tell you this, Kemp, that if I knew, and a lot of times we know that this wasn't going to work out, that I was going to share that and just say, you know what, we only have this much runway left. I would love for you to find another job. So, and I was prepared to do that.
That's the right amount. Sorry, the right amount of transparency, it sounds like it, there in that situation, really valuable for you. I love how you contrasted your approach with sort of the, no, it's not going to happen, or no, that's not possible. The amount of honesty you're able to share there. And I've heard that exact term, that exact statement before that you used, and it sat well with me. It gave me It felt like you were on my side and doing what you could. And I think it's really
Yeah.
important. That's the valuable
Yeah.
transparency, I think, for sure.
Thank you.
Tell us about a time when you're able to create and build culture or community successfully. What was the hardest part of that?
Yeah, I'm really proud because I've done it a few times. But I will just give this one example of, we can talk about team, we can talk about, the community we've built with our partners, with our mentors and mentees. But I think one of the things that, again, stands out about building any community successfully is first knowing what the community needs, why the community is coming together, not because of what you want to do as a leader, not the community that you envision building. And I think this is where a lot of us make mistakes. Okay, I want a place that's like ABC, and we're going to have people that are like, XYZ. That is a big mistake. I think going to the heart of what is it that people need? What problem is this community going to solve? What does that look like? And then involve those people. And I think this is where, and I will very openly share, when we launched our networking app, which was what we were before, 3 years ago. And, it was, just, we didn't know, it was just like, well, we want to easily connect women with each other based on their common goals, interests, and location. And we were doing that. But when COVID hit, we really looked at what is it that they need? Because it was a self-serve model, we didn't really know too much beyond the data insights we could get from the app. And so that's when we said, you know what, let's hit pause. Let's really see what people want. And obviously we use data too, but we also started to see that data suggests that over 87% of our 2,000 members wanted to, find a mentor. 30% wanted to be mentors. So instead of just launching something, what I did was I reached out to some partner companies that we were working with at the time, where they would use our, software to connect their people. To say, can we have a few women? This is what we're envisioning. We want to build a mentorship platform, but we don't know it all, and we're going to figure it out. And they trusted us in being able to figure it out. But please just give us a few women at a time, and we'll match them with mentors. We're going to do everything manually. We're going to see how this works. And oh my God, that experience has told me so much, or taught me so much, that you start to feel kind of, I wouldn't say like stupid, but it's almost like how did you not do this before? People build things for assuming that they're addressing a market need, but we don't leave our buildings. We don't get out there and talk to people, and just not like, oh, what kind of technology you want? Because you may not get, you never build technology based on what people tell you. But basically, just even in terms of what their needs are, like what are some of the challenges women face? What are some of the opportunities they want to explore? Why are women leaving the workplace? So then just going back to the heart of why we wanted to, even as an example, build a mentorship platform. We have a robust community of mentors that is growing. These are amazing women leaders across Canada, right? So just even building that community, and why do they stay with us? One, they trust us that we have the best interests of mentees and mentors. Two is that they know that if they need something, Locelle will be able to help them. So again, really building that authenticity, being transparent, what is it like to be a mentor? How, and just again, alignment and expectations. That is key in building community. When you promise a lot of things and you can't deliver on them, yeah, you lose trust and they're not going to come back to you. And I've learned through some lessons before, but this time around, we have had so many learnings. We just went back to people, and anytime we launch a new feature, anytime we add onto our platform, we go and ask the community, this is what we're thinking in terms of like, this is the problem we want to solve. How do you envision that? Have you seen any examples? Like, what do you think would be, something that you would engage with? So I think, again, not assuming too much, asking people, getting that trusted group of focus, whether it's, people who are highly influential, people who know what they're doing, people who really care about this topic, and then listen to that feedback. So I think community building is not easy. And the center at the heart of everything is transparency, honesty, being, raw, and being able to share, what, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And if people trust you to figure it out, yeah, they'll join you.
Yeah, I think
so it's hard.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like there's a parallel there for just individual relationships. The things you were saying and what you're talking about. It's definitely for organizations and community building, but so many of the sort of rules and the truths that you spoke of really speak to individual relationship building as well. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. My team and I were really excited about the opportunity to interview you, and your story is really inspiring for everybody. I wanted to
Thank
know what.
you.
No, my pleasure. I wanted to know what women would want to ask you. So I asked my female coworkers to share questions they had for you. And so that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the interview. So here we go. I would love to know, as a female CEO, if there's a difference in how you're treated or perceived not only by men, but by women in business. We often hear about men not taking women seriously in positions of power. What about women, and how do they compare?
Yeah, that is a big question. I do think, if just even focusing on my personal experiences, and that's what I'm going to speak about. One of the things that would stand out in the challenges that I've faced a lot, especially being the CEO of a tech company, and that's a key word here, is that any conferences that I would go to previous to COVID, I would get harassed. I would get, comments like, "Oh, you look like you work in marketing." You can't argue because I did. But I also have background in software engineering, right? So I just felt the need to always bring that to the forefront. I have blonde hair. I mean, I'm from Pakistan originally, but and I don't have blonde hair to be white. I just have blonde hair, or the color that I have is because I like it. And so for, just even hearing things like, oh, this persona of like a female CEO in tech is just, I think it's now changing. We're changing face of leadership, which is amazing, but it's still where people focus on my looks versus my talent. And COVID was pretty amazing in that. I have like I have like literally like 4 to 5 pieces of clothing that are my go-to. I wash them, just to be on record. But it's just being able to get to a point where my work is so much more important than what I'm looking like. Previous to this, even today, I will admit that I would have my hair properly done, like proper makeup and clothes and my suit, or whatever, right? It's just my brand. And now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, I have said where business is growing. And I think of all these incredible, sure, male CEOs that everybody thinks of when we think of a male CEO in tech. They don't care about what they look like. And for women, the stereotype is that just automatically, and that bias, I have that in me too. And I think it's going to take a long time for all of us to let go of that unconscious bias. Is when we look at a woman, we first look at what she's looking like, what she's wearing, how she's interacting, like her body language and all those things, right? Versus with men, that is just not even there. Sure, if a man looks handsome, that's bonus, but that's not my focus. Like, I want to care about what you have to bring. What's your talent? And so I think that bias is just there on men's side, but also women. And that's the one thing that I found that, when I launched Locelle, I was like, yeah, I'm going to launch this tech company. I go out there and I would meet a lot of women CEOs at events. And the first reaction of most of them, and these were again also CEOs, was like you, like without saying that it's you, it's just, we know it, right? It's like, okay, well, good luck type of, look. And then I would say, well, I'm an immigrant from Pakistan and I have a background in software engineering. And, I worked in tech for a decade. And then they would be like, okay, all right, and then they would take me seriously. And I cannot tell you how many times that's happened where I've been, again, stereotyped, discriminated against, and sometimes it's benefiting me. Where it's like, oh, like, yeah, let's bring Humaira because she looks totally different than a perceived CEO. So I am sometimes brought into universities to speak so that women could look, because I'll go and wear my red heels if I want to, right? I'll wear my cape blazer if I want to. And then they just, again, showing that you don't have to look and be a certain way to be a CEO of a tech company. You could look like that, or you could wear those clothes or whatever that may be and still do good work. And that's something that I it's benefited me, but it's also, I think in most cases, it hasn't worked out. And so I always lead in with, okay, I have a background in this and I have this, whereas a man wouldn't have to see that. So I think just again, I think the stereotype exists, and it's not even the problem of like the women today. I think that it's the systemic thing where I look at my daughters, they're 5 and 7, and that just adds fuel to the fire for me because they go out and they're in dance camps this week, and I had talked to my husband and said, we're never going to put my kids in dance, like girls in dance, just because it's like a stereotype, right? But we did, just because I was like, you know what, Humaira, maybe they will love it. Well, let's just try it out. There's only, I think in the class of, it's the opposite, right? So like in a class of say like 20 girls, there's like 2 boys. And again, what are we teaching our kids? That dance and like, the dresses and all that, like girls are supposed to be that way. If you go to like science camps, it's filled with boys, even though things are changing. But my girls are usually the first ones to be there because we make an effort to make sure that happens. But if we didn't, the representation from an early stage is so low in these things that I'm not surprised. So, and again, so much focus on if you go to a store, you just see girls and boys section. It's like, for boys, it's like NASA on their t-shirts, it's like cars and it's like buildings and you just, this really creative stuff. For girls, it's rainbows and flowers. And I am just sick and tired of it. And so I think it starts so early that subconsciously, like, even for girls, I see it. It's like, I need to look good. And then for boys, it's not about looking good. It's about the talent that they bring and what they're gonna do with their lives. So I think that narrative there, I think it's too late when we get to university level. It is too late. And we need to do something before. So we're doing our best. I brought in the science world. I was so lucky to be featured alongside some other women in STEM. I was on their wall for like a year, which is amazing. But I brought my girls there. This was probably the last big event that happened, even in like, I don't know, Vancouver. But I remember it was March 4th last year. And I brought my girls. I live in Victoria, but we traveled. I brought my husband, and the girls were just like, wow, like women in STEM, and my mommy is there. And so I think that's really important. If you ask my daughters, what does your mommy do? Well, she's a leader, she's a CEO. They know what that means. So for a lot of young girls, they may not know what a CEO means. So I think, and I have a tech company too, right? So I think that this is where we need to change the narrative at an early age. And sorry, I got so distracted because I'm so passionate about this. Of like, I think it's not even women in the workplace today. It's how they have been raised. It's how they have seen society. It's how they see leadership. At the end of the day, CEO is a man. Whether you can hire somebody in marketing, like chief of marketing, great, but you're not making the ultimate decisions. So the decisions are made by mostly men. And so I think it's just the systemic issue that I hope in my lifetime we can move the needle forward a little bit, and we're doing our best. So there's definitely that bias even for women.
Yeah, I think that the needle has definitely moved in my lifetime, and I can only hope it moves more. You make a really good point, though. It's so ingrained culturally and societally that gender norms and roles. It's difficult as a parent to not have your children gravitate to those things, especially when they enter school and there's sort of the group think and that kind of thing. I really struggle with it myself because they come home talking about what different colors are for who and all this stuff, and you're just like, no, none of that is real, and it's so hard to fight, the peer group and the peer. I remember my oldest, for the longest time, he would believe his peer group over his father about practical things.
What do you know?
I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry, man. Here's the internet. Here's the right answer for you. You also had me thinking about for CEOs, especially in tech companies, the idea that there's a finite amount of leadership or decision-making energy in a day. And so that's a lot of the reason that Jobs and Zuckerberg wear the same thing every day or have a closet full of the same clothes or eat the same, and Obama was the same way. That they eat the same breakfast, wear the same clothes every day, and that way they don't have to make those decisions, and they can put that decision-making power to more important decisions. So, imagining all the decisions that you have to make as a woman to sort of maybe fulfill what those societal expectations you're discussing could, ultimately put you in somewhat of a disadvantage for your decision-making power each day.
Oh my Lord, this topic. Okay, here's what we call emotional labor. There's the visible labor where even, things like breakfast and, yes, and so true. So for me, COVID was amazing in that the silver lining was that I was able to decide, you know what? It's the same clothes that I'm going to wear in any given week. My team knows it. I even started to make comments. I was like, you know what? As you may have noticed, my closet has shrunk, right? There's only a few things that I wear because I know that they work. I know they're professional. I know that they're easy to clean, wash, whatever that may be, right? So, and I can walk out the door if there's an emergency, I need to go pick up my daughters. I know it's good enough that I could just walk out. And so there's definitely that takes away, but the pressure off. But for women, especially, I think there's this added pressure of, again, like I said, how we are perceived. What is it that I'm saying? And I find that even with the work that I do today, and this is a little controversial, but I think this needs to be talked about in that, we have this job posting up. This is like this past week, job posting up. This is our first, client success coordinator position, which was previously, kind of done with the help of internships, which was part of our growth strategy for some time. But now we're like, great, and it's like entry level. It was clearly identified, even in the posting, this is entry level. And, I posted in one of the Slack groups and it blew up. It's like, this is less than living wage. And I mean, if I want to argue, I can argue for the sake of argument, that living wage is essentially like where two parents work with supporting two kids, right? We're going to get that, feedback from people. And just even knowing that, and then what was used against me, because none of the companies that I know will have salary listed. I wanted to do that in the honor of transparency. I don't want to take you through like 3 interviews and then tell you that this is going to pay you this much. And especially because I know a lot of women will apply, and women do not negotiate as well as men do. So given that, this is what we put out there. This is the starting point. And one thing that stood out, which is so relevant, was used against me is that, oh, you are here to create equitable workplaces for women, and you have this salary, like you have more responsibility. So here I am thinking, now I have responsibility as a woman CEO of how I hold myself, how I represent other women, right? Because you are a role model. And now it's about the work that I do. Oh, if you are an equitable workplace, then you should be doing better. We do better. I mean, we do so well. People want to come back to us, they want to work again with us. But it's just an example of how there's this extra emotional labor, whether you're going out to a conference of what you're looking like, what you're wearing, again, that extra, right? Mm-hmm. To like, even now with the work that we do, like how we pay people, how we treat people, how we are perceived in the public. And I worry sometimes that, if I'm going to go out, without any of my persona, which is why the masks I'm so grateful for masks. It's just, now I have to be on because I'm representing something. It's just a lot. I think there's a lot of emotional labor of thinking through little things about, not the day-to-day for women in the workplace, where it's like, about even an example is making lunch for our kids. Just things like that we just take on systemically, societally, like whatever that is, like we do take that on. And now on top of that, it's about, even the question that you asked me, it comes up a lot. How do other women founders treat you? And it's like, well, why is that even a question? I mean, I know why it's a question, but again, there's just so many different like emotional labor pieces to think through, to work through, to navigate. That I think we get this like almost like unfair disadvantage.
Yes, totally agree. And in partnerships in the household as well. Like I know in my household,
totally.
I do a lot of meal prep and meal cooking, but I don't do a lot of meal planning. And that is, emotional and, that's mental energy required to make those decisions and
that's the hardest thing I
plan
find.
that out.
That's even
Probably,
decide.
Yeah, if everything's there, it's relatively easy to get it done. You had me thinking that, a little bit about that sort of job posting thing and the realization that your company is a startup. It's an entry level role. I think, the way I look at equity or equality in your spaces, are the salaries equitable and equal in your organization, across the board? And it's unfortunate that people are holding you to a standard that they might hold a company that has already 50 million in annual recurring revenue, or large profitability, or the capability to do what to do what's right in the grand open market, as opposed to doing what's right within your organization. And that leads us into our next question. How does culture differ at Locelle from other mainstream sort of more male-dominated organizations?
Yeah, I love this question, because this is something that I know our team, we're 7 now, all women at this point. It was, some of it was by design, that we were intentional. Like our tech position, like our tech lead is a woman, and some of it just kind of, we just attracted, that talent. But this is the one thing that they talk amongst themselves, is like, this is like our dinner table conversation. We hired another woman and she's from China, or we hired another woman, she's from India. Like, this is amazing. But this goes to show that when you have, again, like a John will hire a Dave and a Dave will hire, it's because you relate more. It's relatability. Can I communicate with this person effectively? Will they understand me? So I think just even for people to know that, and I'm such a, especially in Victoria and Vancouver, a lot of people know me. So, they know, I'm this authentic and, raw person. And so that's kind of, that has attracted the right type of people, who really align with our mission of creating, again, moving the needle forward for women in the workplace. And so the culture, again, behind my back too, from what I hear, that it's really a place where people know that they can express themselves. They have that psychological safety. They don't have to worry about how, I get called out all the time in a respectful way, right? Like, we have that culture where we sit down and I lead by example, in that, what, I said this word, let's create our own kind of language book of like, what's appropriate, what's not. Even though, so as an example, using the word girl is not okay in today's, especially not today, it was never okay, but I think now, because we have this opportunity, when you say a girl, like a lot of times it's like, oh, that girl's amazing, even referring to me, like I'm a woman, right? Like I would never say Kemp is a boy. Like that would be an insult. So I think that just even the thinking, like, depending on who says, like if your mom says boy, that's fine, but if I just even, I think if you don't know me and you call me a girl, I am not okay with that. And so just even changing narratives around that, and just knowing that we will always be better. We will always do better. We have an open learning culture where I can learn from everybody just as much as they come here to learn from me. I think it's pretty powerful. And then obviously, the flexibility. They know, like, I lead by example. If I have to take off, I make sure everybody knows I am taking off to pick up my kids. There's an emergency, something happens, I let them know this is okay, family comes first. Like, it's just a rule. No questions asked, family comes first, your health comes first. Because I've also learned that a lot of deadlines that we put on our people is a lot of time, they can be navigated. Deadlines can shift. I can talk to our partners and clients and they'll understand. But I think sometimes you put this extra pressure that shouldn't be there. And I don't know if it's because we're bootstrapped and we don't have VCs, like calling us at 9 p.m. on a Friday, asking what the status is and, what happened with a certain client. I don't know if it's that. But I do know that as leaders, we have the opportunity to share that deadlines can shift if they can, but it's the people that come first. So I think just living through those values and sharing those values by example. I think it's kind of good that I have 2 kids. I'm a mother, a working mother, and my husband also has a full-time job. And it's like, I think which is why I feel a little extra responsibility in that, being able to share those things. That I'm not a super, Wonder Woman. Like, yes, I make a lot of stuff happen. I get things done, but there's a time and place for things. So awesome. Yeah, I think our culture, I would say, I think it's the one big thing that really attracts. And I know at some point we have to add men to the mix, because I would love to, but it's also just that I know right now everybody's here because they're like, wow, Humaira, like our previous company just happened or that happened. This would never be allowed. Like we have a policy, 2 of our people are off today, and it's like, nobody's going to message them, like, period.
Nice.
I know, like, we've talked before, we've planned ahead. Nobody's going to bug them. They don't have Slack on their phones. They don't have like all of that. And even I'm actually going to Tofino next week, and I shared with my team, I will not be available unless obviously there's something super urgent, pressing, email me. But Slack will not be available. Like, do not message me on Slack. So nice. I think it's just how you lead with example, and you set like what's acceptable. Because one thing I learned, somebody shared with me, and I've taken it to my heart, is that you get what you demand. And you, I think you, or sorry, you, or something about like, if you tolerate things, you'll get those things, right? So I think, so for us, it's like there's hard lines of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But also it's like, you know, yeah, people know they're here to get the work done. It's not a place where you could just be like chilling all day. Like, no, but I think just the expectation, right? Yeah. There's a time and place for things, so.
Awesome. Thank you. The girls thing that you mentioned, very big in my life. You know, my partner has changed the way I talk. And it was interesting. I was speaking with my colleagues yesterday. Two of them are two young female graduates from university, you know, really successful in what they've done. And I asked them, I said, you know, what do you think about this? Because in my house it's a bad word and we don't use it. And it was interesting, and maybe it's, you know, it's a matter of time and experience, but they kind of, it wasn't something they thought about, which I thought was quite interesting, and I was a bit surprised. But hopefully they don't have to, and maybe that's the hope, for sure. So when oh, here it is. Okay, how is success recognized, defined, and celebrated at Locelle, and how is that different than in more male-dominated organizations?
Yeah, I think we all, I can say, kind of, you know, could do better with how we celebrate our wins and success. I will say this though, that every week, we've been doing this for the last more than a month actually. We started to celebrate like every week, like what's the one win? You know, we have obviously our monthly lunches, you know, obviously paid for by Locelle, where we connect and don't really talk about work so much. It's really about, you know, coming together, sharing our lives, whatever it is that we want to share, making space for everybody to share. But also like every week, just even, you know, sharing the wins and the challenges people have had. That's something that we have been doing for a month, and it's gone really well. And because I found that unless you are vocal, an extrovert, and you're in a sales role, it's hard to be able to celebrate the wins. What about somebody who takes care of the administrative stuff? That is key to any company, but it does go unnoticed and unrecognized. And I think so that this is something that we're changing here at Locelle, is that everybody brings value, and we want to celebrate that. So, and I also would say this to leaders, and I try to do this myself as much as I can, is to reward good behavior, non-behavior. I'm talking about my kids now, reward good behavior. Reward good work, reward good performance. And also if there's constructive feedback, give that in private. And as soon as possible, so that people know. And they'll know the next time, you know what, if I've done something, and you know, we'll have this conversation and we'll make it better. And so I think I think about with whether that's constructive feedback or celebrating wins, it's about what is the outcome that we want. Do we want people to be motivated and do better, right? Or is it just, I don't know, like whatever you're motivated, that is it for us, where we want people to do better, be motivated, be excited, know the value they bring. Whether you are in an administrative role, whether in a sales role, whether in a marketing role, being able to celebrate that. Because I realized at one of our meetings a couple months ago is that one of the team members said, well, I don't have anything exciting to share. And I was like, well, what about that project that you completed? She's like, oh, like, yeah, but it's like, okay, well, it's not as big as what somebody else did, right? But I think that this is where leaders have the opportunity to acknowledge the value each position brings, and being able to communicate that when you're onboarding them. Like, look, this is what we've seen done well in the past. This is how successful we define in this role. And being, again, transparency, authenticity, being open about that. And as long as people know the value they bring and that will be acknowledged, I can tell you motivation, productivity will go through the roof.
Awesome. Thank you. Was bridging the power gap between men and women in higher positions or roles like a CEO one of the purposes behind starting Locelle?
Um, I think now in the grand scheme of things, yes, it makes sense. But that's not why I started Locale. I think for me, it was really seeing that after I had my two daughters, I've been in the tech industry for so long. That's all pretty much I've known. But I come from Pakistan and I have a background in software engineering. And when I say that, for 2 years, I did software engineering there from one of the best schools. My family moved to Canada in 2005, and that's when I got into York University. I was lucky. I got accepted into all schools. Humble brag. But I found that, I chose York, and when I got there, all my credits were transferred. I'd done 2 years and I got over 63 credits. I remember, I think it was something like that. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. And so I was naturally I was put in like a third year class. And at that point, most women have dropped out. They start, but they drop out. For me, it was a big shock. It was a big, more than the cultural shock, because I grew up watching, American movies and stuff. But this was a big shock. And for me, and it was because in Pakistan, in my school, we had between 40 to 60% women in engineering. And here it's the opposite. It's wow. And so I think that's where I was like, what's going on? Are we in Canada? Is it progressive? What's going on? Anyway, but what I ended up doing, so I ended up dropping out after 8 months because I would switch classes and I would do, maybe in this class I would have women, and there were sometimes there were a few women, but it were few, and you could really count. And that's not what, why I was there. So then I moved into communications, and guess what? It was filled with women. And I loved it and it was great because I got to learn how to present, how to communicate, how to make friends. It was fantastic. And I think the best decision I made at that time. But thinking about all those things and then working for other tech companies, I had to quit my jobs a few times, working for really, renowned companies. And it was because the cultures were awful. It's just how women were treated was awful. For me, I am here for my talent and not for anything else. It was just different, right? And so for me, and just even after I had my two daughters, that's when it really hit me with all of that backstory. After I had my two daughters, then no. Women belong in workplaces. We are so talented. We need to advance. What's going on? And that's when I did my discovery, and I learned that in Canada, and in US alone, just in tech, and that's one of the many male-dominated industries, 56% of the women leave their jobs mid-career. That is a big problem because the talent's leaving. You're not going to get the representation in leadership if they're dropping out. And then there's very few. And so that was my kind of goal. I wanted to know why they were dropping out, why we were dropping out, and what is it that we needed to do to keep us, but also advance, so that there was representation in executive leadership, that there were no leaky pipelines, and that women knew that there was a path for them. We don't have a playbook. I say this all the time. We do not see, I see my husband, he's promoted a lot of men. He's given them raises, right? And because he empathizes with them, and he believes in them. He wants to retain them. If we don't have the women, we're not going to make those advancements just like men do. And so I think it's really important, and that's why I started. And then obviously, we when we talk about the power gap, there is a power gap. There's a power gap everywhere. When I was looking to raise earlier 2 years ago, the things that I would hear, oh my goodness, extra labor, right? Oh, you women need to get off your asses. And then, pardon my language, but that's what they said. You women need to get off your asses and do something, with your life. And I remember this was an investor, right? Very well-known investor. And I was just and I spoke up to him and I said, first of all, that is a very inappropriate thing to say, because everybody else around me was a man. I was the only woman there. But I think what gave me power to be able to speak up, and most women wouldn't be able to, is that I wasn't raising. So I didn't care. I don't care who you are. I don't need your money. If I don't need your money, I'm not going to be in that, spot.
Well, and you probably don't want that person's money anyway, right?
Exactly. So it was thank you so much for showing your true colors. But I think this is, and this is something that women get all the time. And I've been advised so many times, okay, when you're raising, make sure you have a co-founder, ideally a male co-founder, a CTO or someone. And it's hard to hear, but I think the power gap is there. And especially if you're looking to build $1 billion business, which is what we're after, if we are going to raise, we need to make sure, which is also why we haven't raised, that we have investors that are strategic partners. They're really aligned with our mission, and they also have access to those customers. Excuse me. But I think the power gap exists, and a lot of times is a barrier for women to not be able to even speak up their minds. So yeah, now that is definitely part of our story, where power does come with money, your status, your influence, and being able to close that power gap. I think it would be pretty fantastic. So even if we, through the work that we do, if we can see more women leaders, leading by example, and further advancing their careers, but also taking others with them, and stop, at least if we can just address retention, I think we're going to be farther ahead. So unfortunately it exists, and I think we'll make some movements.
Yeah, there's a few people I'm looking forward to introducing you to, who are female mission-led investors in Silicon Valley that I've had the chance to meet, and even just to hopefully give you some mentorship. I think that it'd be super valuable.
That would be amazing,
because they probably have networks of more amazing people just like you, and so that'll be great.
Awesome.
So next question for you. You kind of inspired me to skip ahead to one of my stock questions here, but tell us a story about being a more junior team member where you had an experience with a bad organizational culture. What was it like? Mm-hmm. How did it make you feel? And what did you learn from it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, there's too many stories, but which is all the more reason for us to do better. And so one of the things that I can share is I had just moved to Vancouver. I just met my husband, and we got married, because obviously as a Pakistani, culture, like you couldn't, I lived in Toronto at the time. We couldn't be together unless we were married. Got married, moved to Vancouver. And I remember one of the jobs my first jobs actually that I took, I was really excited for. I'm not going to name the company, but I got there and it was a sales role. In that role, I remember I started to, and again, it's so hard, Kemp, because especially when you're a junior in a certain career, like I had a marketing background. For me, I wanted to learn about sales. I think, you can make so much money with sales. So I wanted to learn about that. And I got this job, and the company was like seemingly amazing. And I remember just going into work and just hearing some like very inappropriate conversations, both amongst men and women alike. And I think women, because the manager was a man. And it's hard. You can't really fight the system so much when you're in that position. But I remember things like I would hear, in a sales context, like I remember being in an elevator with the manager and a few other colleagues, and they were talking about like, drop your pants if you need to make a sale. And this is just a plain like conversation. And I remember, again, I'm coming from, also Pakistan, still, I think like 6 years in Canada, or 5 years, I forget. It's been a while, but and this is 10 years ago. And I remember just thinking, is it culture here in Canada, or is it here, at this company, or is it just in this role? I didn't know. It wasn't okay either way. It made me feel extremely uncomfortable. And then I thought, to be successful in this role, do I have to talk like this? Like what is going on? So I didn't know, right? So this was my first month there. And then I started to, just kind of see patterns of like, oh, put Humaira in these territories because there are mostly men there. And it's just like, what is going on? Like, I'm not selling myself, I'm selling a product. And it was just like, just even starting to think of like how sales works. And I wasn't sure if it was sales itself that you just have to, be in certain, I don't know, whatever, you get the idea. But it's just like, just even knowing, I was like, well, this is not for me. Yeah. And I remember I left that company and for other reasons too, beyond how the language was used, beyond what was actually celebrated. I even remember the downtown core, they had this like really young, good looking guy as a salesperson. I was like, I would love to work in this territory. I was like, oh no, because most of the people that they sell to would be women. Anyway, so it's just like, wow, this is how this works. So yeah, it was really hard, but unfortunately for me, it was a lot to unpack. And I just didn't feel, I think intuition is a powerful thing. I was doing really well there. And I realized that I just couldn't. It was having an impact on my mental health. And I actually quit before my probation. It was easy for me to do that. But I remember just the conversations behind my back, and I would hear from some other trusted people, like, she's never going to be successful. Well, look where I'm at. So I think it's just those things that happen. But I think as women, as people, if something makes you uncomfortable, it probably is not okay, very likely not okay. And just leave. I think you cannot change that system if it's everybody, especially in a junior position. I really feel for people today. Like I think things are getting better. Like even if it's for company mandate perspective, even if people are not themselves changing, I think at least with some policies, it's a bit better, I hope. But yeah, it was hard. It's like, I'm never going to be successful in this because all these salespeople are men who are highly successful. And if that's how I'm going to be treated, this is not for me. So I think that's a problem. And now obviously I know a lot of amazing, successful women in sales. And they'll tell you stories. My goodness.
Yeah.
So kudos to them.
I'm watching a series on Prime called Bosch, and it's about the LAPD. And in the final season, there's a lot of the gender reckoning in terms of the police department. And it's really interesting. The more valuable thing you had me thinking about was the layers of culture, right? You have the planet, like the global culture, you have the national or Canadian culture, and then you have, this company's culture, and then you have the department's culture, right? Not only the department's culture because it's sales, but also who leads it, what's their culture, and then also you have the individuals in the team. And so, it's these layers that create what I would call sort of this constant, I think of the forge, or like this concentrated environment that's like lots of pressure in it. And it's not a pleasant place to be, for sure. Let's move on. I would love, my team would love to hear about what resources are available or that you have implemented in your company regarding work-life balance, family-work balance, women's health, or have there been certain things that you've been doing that maybe other CEOs aren't doing in that area? I think you talked a little bit about it before in terms of the norms and the expectations and the communication and how you what that value is, family first, and that's totally fine. Are there other areas that you've gone into that maybe other people haven't, or things that you've done that are innovative or different in that space?
Yeah, I think for our team, definitely, the leading with example, being able to share what should be acceptable, what should not be, and anyway, so basically creating our own new norm of this is also an example of a workplace. Beyond that, we obviously have some, we provide mentorship to women at work, and that's kind of our key focus. But I think one of the things that we do that I'm not sure if others do, is to take some time to really develop, whether it's an intern or a full-time staff, it's take them some time to share with them, just even in terms of like, this is a strength that I see in you, whether it's here, whether it's elsewhere. And being able to give, again, like I said, like constructive feedback right on the spot in a way that motivates people to be better. Being able to even share, this is where I think, there's some room for growth. I'm happy to actually help you with that. I think, and not just suggest, also, this is how I am going to help you with it. I think that is the best thing we can do. And yes, as leaders, everybody's looking for our time. And I think just even recognizing, okay, well, person X doesn't speak up enough. Perhaps they're an introvert. Perhaps they haven't had enough experience as others have, right? Negotiating and asking them, how do you feel about this? What is it that you need? I think you could use some help in this area, but what do you think? What is it that keeps you up at night, right? It's like the questions that I think, I find with the mentorship I've received as a female founder, as a CEO, as a leader in general, I try to bring that into the workplace. And sometimes I may overshare, but it's okay. I think because this will, and maybe we're setting the bar too high with, how they should be treated, what they should expect of workplaces. Sure, we may not pay Amazon salaries, but we have a lot of focus on personal and professional development. And really, and I don't say the word, everybody's family, because no, they're not, but they're just, our team. We're working towards this vision. And if any time, I think just even sharing, we probably do that. Maybe most companies don't. Even as an example of stock options, this is what it's worth today. This is what it's going to be worth 2 years from now. Is this something of interest to you, right? Not just saying, well, we're going to pay you this much, and this is how much you're going to get in this area. And that we also ask now, in terms of, and this is something that I find that, I know big companies are different and they have their own policies, but, sure, like as an example, my husband and I don't use a lot of our, medical and dental benefits. Like we probably should, but we don't. We're just so busy. And I thought that got me thinking, should we have a certain budget and allocate that accordingly, right? You may not need a chiropractor, but maybe you need, some, I don't know, like advisory service. Maybe you need a coach, right? Maybe you don't need gym membership. Maybe you need a meditation thing. Just even asking people and just allocate that budget accordingly. I think that is something to seeing what people actually need. And creating that equitable workplaces where, and the company wins too, because then our budget can go in that capacity. Just, I think there's a few things that we try to do differently. And again, and I think the work that we do has taught me a lot. When we talk about equitable workplaces, we should give people what they actually need to do their jobs better. And an example is one thing that I would love to do as we grow is to see if instead of, and sure, when we talk about equity, some people might need more funds than others, given, however much support they need. But one thing that's on my mind is as we grow is to see, is there any way we could cover childcare costs or, subsidize that? Because, I think for both my husband and I, more than medical, dental, vision care, all those things, we don't even really use unless needed. We would love subsidized childcare, whether that's going towards summer camps, whether that's going towards their education. What is it so for parents, that would be amazing because it costs a lot that we actually use and pay every month. So I think just even thinking through how we can really make workplaces better for everyone at scale is something that I think about. And we've started to work on that for, obviously permanent full-time employees. Okay, this is the budget. How do you want to use it? You know what? You want to go with the best plan ever? If that covers it, go for it. If you want to have the basic plan, but have, the medical and dental, but have other parts, go for it.
Yeah, you have me thinking a lot about something that we're thinking about here and that has come up recently in sort of a bigger context. And that's, one thing we're thinking about is sort of singles discrimination, we're calling it. And then the other one is sort of patriarchal benefits. So if the benefit is there's a chef in the office and so a chef makes lunch every day, what about the person who doesn't eat lunch or who likes to have soylent for lunch and just kind of, so the way you're describing it is exactly what sort of how we're seeing sort of the future is like, the individual and, the flexibility that's needed to provide the benefits that each of them needs is very different than sort of the cookie cutter stuff that we've been going with for so long. We got time for a couple more questions. I thought this one was really important to get in. So, with Locelle mentorship, it's really big. Can you share a couple success stories coming out of the mentorship program at Locelle with us?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many. First of all, I do have to say this, that, just the culture of learning and development for women that we're building, it just melts my heart. The other day I connected with this woman and just as a case, let's do a case study. Are you open to it? Like, yeah, sure. And then I asked them, what's the one win that you can share that you got out of it? And I was thinking maybe they will say things like, you know what, my confidence is really improved, which is mostly like pretty much everybody finds that their confidence has improved, which is key for women in the workplaces. And then they ended up sharing, they said, well, I actually got a promotion. And I was like, what? So even in the live video, I was like, what? That's amazing. And then obviously they shared that a lot of times, you know what you want. You either don't want to ask for it, or just don't have the courage, or don't know how to ask for it, how to, share your value proposition as a person, and a contributor to the team. And that was like, I was like, wow, like that's amazing, because it's doing two things. One, it's advancing women. She got promoted to a much better position, more strategic. And two, for companies to retain that person, because this is what happens, right? I'm never going to get this here, so I got to find another job. And that's the advice you'll just get, if you ask other people. Like, yeah, that's not going to happen. If it hasn't happened yet, sometimes all you have to do is ask. Leaders are so busy. Like, if you don't ask, and if somebody else does, then obviously, like, yeah, it's going to happen. So I think that's definitely one that really stands out. And then the other one is, we also, our goal is to also democratize access to mentorship. So a lot of times mentorship is for people who leadership thinks of, like, they're a top talent. But what about Sally, who sits behind the computer all day, is running your ship, and you don't even know it, and she doesn't ask for it? What if you don't think she's top talent, right? So I think just democratizing access to top talent, whether that comes from an underrepresented communities where women are just simply grateful to have a job. And I'm not patronizing anyone. It's just for a lot of women, I'll just take whatever I get. And that's not okay. But I think how we, create that like validation that what you bring is so unique. You don't have to be like everybody else. Actually, by being different, you bring in, this assets. I think sometimes even that validation that they get from this external, unbiased mentor, that is key, because then they start to see, well, wow, like I thought my language was a barrier. It's actually a strength. And because I forgot what I was watching the other day. It was pretty funny. And in that they said, well, chances are if somebody speaks a second language, they're a lot smarter than you, because, they already know another language and they have mastered this enough to be able to communicate with you. So that was interesting for me. I was like, wow, that's a good perspective. But anyway, so it's just being able to get that validation where, they go from not speaking up at all to actually being at the table, helping make decisions, because they should and they can. So, just even that. And last but not least, the diversity piece, because there's not, even within, leadership or management, there's a lot of white women, which I'm not going to complain about, to be honest. I think any woman's great. But because there's not enough representation of women of color, and I also have challenges with that term, to be honest, because I am woman of color, but I'm not as colorful. That sounded bad, but you know what I mean. So it's just like, so anyway, but for the BIPOC community, I think just even for them to get access to mentors that look like them and that are successful. And this is something where we do really well, where we connect them with, relevant mentors. Whether you're looking for that, sense of belonging, whether you're looking to get guidance on how do you advance into leadership, whether you're looking for guidance on how to navigate your current work situation, ask for what you want. I think that there's a lot of stories around that, but for us, it's really key to see, needle moving forward, whether that's through promotion, whether that's through you performing better, whether that's you feeling like you belong here and your ideas matter. Because
Definitely.
You are hired for that reason, and you're not, if you're not voicing that, that's a waste of talent, both to the company and for you. So yeah, lots of amazing success stories, and they make me smile. And even for our mentors, for them to connect with these innovative, like up and coming leaders, it's such a gift, because a lot of them want to connect with the newer, generation, newer ideas of like a different perspective, and they end up learning so much more. I think it's fantastic what we're doing, and definitely adds fuel to the fire.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as we wrap up, everyone wants to know how somebody like you professionally develops. What books do you read? Are there podcasts that you're all about? What websites are you always on? What newsletters do you read? What stuff can people consume that you consume to get better at their craft as leaders of people?
Yeah, I unfortunately I don't read a lot of books. It's funny because you read like Steve Jobs used to do this, or like Bill Gates reads these many books, and I'm just like, wow. I would just be reading books then. For me though, I do listen to How I Built This by Raz. I think it's an amazing podcast, and anytime I feel down, which can be a few times in a month, it's a roller coaster, but just even learning, it's amazing to hear other people who have built these incredibly big companies, and share their stories, and there's so much to relate to. That makes me go, well, yeah, if they can do it, so can I. I think there's that. The other thing that I do is I've built this amazing network of both male and female founders. And just being able to have that space where I can just go and share, this is what I'm dealing with. Even I remember when we started to really grow, I was so overwhelmed because I had all this time I've spent the last 2 years is like grinding and hustling and just really, didn't see much success beyond some recognition. And now that we were growing, the problems were bigger. And so just being able to have that network of, founders who have built companies, not like a CEO, because that's very different. And then you get to the CEO level of like, okay, well, now I'm talking more like COO type of stuff. So I actually love to connect with COOs because I believe somebody shared, like one of the Vancouver founders shared, you're not a CEO, Humaira, you're a COO. Because yes, you are a CEO too, but you're more of a COO because you have to run the day-to-day operations, team and everything, because we don't have a COO. And he's like, you don't need a COO because that's what you are. Anyways, I think just even surrounding yourself with people who are in your stage, perhaps a little junior, where I mentor, and really advanced. And then you pick who you want to connect with at what cadence and why. I think the why is really important. Sure, you want to go for a coffee or a drink, that's fine. But like, I think you want to make most of your time and their time too. So having that network is really, really key. And another thing that I really do is I watch a lot of videos on certain topics. So whether that means, building content for our, network of women, or is it for me to be better? And for me to be better, I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but I do watch Oprah a lot. And especially in times, like I said, when, going through like self-doubt, which never ends, you watch those things, and you hear those stories of adversity, and you hear how these people have, navigated failure. You don't have to be like a rich or like a super famous person to be successful, right? I think it just even like life lessons are key. So just watching those videos, some TED Talks, obviously Brené Brown, stuff, Simon Sinek, like all those things, like depending on what challenges I'm facing. I mean, we're also lucky to have access to YouTube. And then last thing that it's kind of relevant, but I do have advisors. So I think having, especially for, access to, say, even Viatech in Victoria. My executive residence is amazing. He's almost like a coach, and I absolutely admire him so much because I will say he was a catalyst in where we are today, and it's been amazing. So having the advisors who are not an investor in your business, who are not who are not your friend, who are just really there to coach you through different business stages. And they'll tell you the hard stuff that even other founders are not going to tell you. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of resources, right? Like I'm part of Women in Cloud Accelerator out of Seattle. We were selected as one of the top 6 finalists to pitch. We didn't win, but that's okay. Like top 6, like globally, which was amazing. The only Canadian company. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. That network is fantastic. So they create access to other, women-led companies, women-led, organizations, but even women focus groups within large organizations like Microsoft, which is incredible for us. So just being part of and pick your top ones, right? Like for me, it's that Women in Cloud Accelerator. And obviously I get some coaching from biotech through my EIR. And then with new ventures, obviously for sales, they have this amazing accelerator going on. Just seeing like, what is it that you need the most right now? And finding those groups, associations, and being actively involved. And, once you're done, say that you're done. Do not linger on, because that's a lot of time wasted. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of resources, and I'd be happy to, especially for women entrepreneurs, if somebody wants to connect with me to see how I've done X, Y, Z, I'd be very happy to share.
Perfect, because that's my next question. Where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is best. I do post a lot of content there as well, pretty active there. Other than that, Instagram is personal, so I wouldn't really. Sure, you can find me on Instagram. I will not add you on Facebook. I'll just share that unless I know you. But I think LinkedIn is definitely where I'm the most active, and also share a lot of great content that I hope others find valuable.
Awesome. So people can message you on LinkedIn if they have a question or looking. Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Humaira, it's been amazing. I've learned so many things, and I can't wait to share your insights and experience with the world. Thank you. Thank you
for reaching out. I appreciate it. This is like something that I'm really passionate about. It's mission aligned, and I do want to share my learnings with people, especially when I can, and I don't have that fear of what are people going to say. So I think it's a good time. Thank you.
Great.